When it comes to dealing with depression, you have been lied to by doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, and this video is going to demystify everything, all the things you've been told about antidepressants, therapy, and all the things that just don't work individually. I'm going to tell you why in this video. So this is going to change everything you know about depression. So the goal of this video is to give a new, holistic, integral approach to how to deal with depression while adding certain practices that you may have not learned before, and things that are really going to blow your mind in terms of how to deal with depression. And this is an expansion on my two previous videos on depression called Why Depression is a Lie and Why Psychologist Sucks. And while the ideas of these videos still hold to this day, I want to add that not all psychologists suck, right? There are many great psychologists out there. I think the issue is not that psychologists are not good, it's that they're not used in conjunction with other practices, more integral practices that can help you not only heal your mind, but also your soul, your body, and so forth. So you have to look at it more in an integral way and look at everything else. And the goal of this video is not to help you cure depression, because there is no set cure for depression. It's different for everyone, and to claim that I'll be able to cure your depression is just a total lie. I'll help you with certain practices, I'll help you deal with it and find certain ways to help you sort of approach depression in a new way that maybe you haven't thought of, and that will be very helpful for you, especially if you've tried everything and for some reason it's just not working. This is not only information but also extremely practical advice, which we'll get into near the later half of the video. So make sure you stay tuned for that. So who is this video for? This video is for people who suffer from depression, whether it be mild, moderate, or severe depression. I want to preface this by saying that if you suffer from mild to moderate depression, this is where this video will help you the most, because at this stage you still have some sort of autonomy and sort of control over your life, so you're able to sort of take action. When you suffer from severe depression, now getting things moving is a bit harder. Now, I'm not saying this video won't help. It'll certainly help you a lot also, but you might want to supplement with other things. For example, talking to a therapist and maybe even antidepressants. If you're severely depressed, you might need more serious intervention. So to keep that in mind, the second type of people that this video is for people who are not exactly sure if they're going through depression or not. They may be sort of in a low mood and they really want to improve their mood, and they just don't like what society is proposing them as solutions, and they want to look at sort of different integral ways and holistic ways to deal with their depression also. This video is also for people who have tried everything when it comes to dealing with depression, and for some reason it just isn't working. You've tried everything. You've tried antidepressants, you've tried therapy, you've tried exercising more, sleeping better, eating right. It's just not helping. This video is perfect for you. Also for people who just want to live a happier life overall. Maybe you're not even depressed, maybe you lack energy, maybe you feel like there's just this one thing missing in your life, sort of existentially or sort of in your soul. This is perfect for you as well. So as a preface and introduction to this video is going to be extremely long, so I'm going to leave timestamps in the comment section, and I'll try to put a table of contents in the video. If it's not there, it'll be in the description or in the comment section, so feel free to skip around, though I highly recommend you watch things in order, because the video is structured in a way to sort of lay a foundation in the beginning and to give you the integral practices near the end when you've understood the material. So I highly recommend you watch it in its structured way, but if you want to skip around, you can also skip around. So why should you listen to me when it comes to this video? Well, I've had a history of depression in my life, so I've gone through 2 to 5 so I've gone through a few depressive episodes. A few months ago, I was diagnosed with going through a major depressive episode, which I judge having largely overcome recently. And I've also had many other sort of depressive episodes, even worse than the one I had a few months ago, and I've also overcame these. So it seems like I've always had more depressive episodes, but I've always found a way to overcome them in a way. Also in my family, I have a history of anxiety and depression, though strangely enough, I've only learned that recently, which is strange. I'm like 26 years old. I've only learned that recently. So I was depressed and I didn't know why for like my teenage years and all that. Also, I've coached people who were going through depression, even severe major depression, borderline suicidal, and some of those people told me that the coaching they had with me was much more helpful than the years of psychotherapy they've had, which is insane to me because I don't have any formal training when it comes to therapy, but for some reason my practices and my tips and my tools that I had in my arsenal were much more helpful than some psychologists. So this is just mind-blowing to me. So, and would I say that I'm healed from depression? I wouldn't say so. I would say that I've learned how to manage when those episodes come very effectively. So then when I slide back into depressive episodes, I know how to come back again. So that's what I would say. I wouldn't say that depression is, forever cured for the rest of your life. Maybe it can be, but I think that certain people have certain temperaments. For example, me, I have a really sort of melancholic temperament, so I tend to get melancholic and sort of existential, nihilistic from time to time. That's just who I am, I think. But I've learned to manage it and turn into something positive. Now, as a huge disclaimer, before we get into the content, I am not a licensed healthcare practitioner. I'm not a psychologist or a doctor. The advice I'll give you in this video is purely experimental. And yes, while I will mention certain studies and get into the science, I will loosely, the way I will quote in this video and sort of refer you to certain studies, I'll do so very loosely. The point of this video is not to get into the granular data of the science, but to give you sort of an overview. And this video assumes that if you are more interested about these scientific sort of aspects, that you do the research yourself. So the quotes will be given in this video sort of in a loose fashion. I do not condone the use of any drugs, supplements, or any mind-altering substance without the recommendation of a doctor or a psychiatrist. So I do not condone the use of any of these drugs. Make sure you consult with a healthcare practitioner before you try any of the supplements or anything I recommend in this video. So I do not condone the use of illegal drugs also for that matter. So this is the culmination of my 12+ years of personal development, the years I've had of coaching people one-on-one and some of them helping them through their depression, also me going through depressive episodes and managing them. And as far as you know, I'm just some random dude on the internet. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. And what I want to say is never trust a man with a mask. Only trust a man who tells the truth. And this is my truth. So first, let's start this video by asking the question, what causes depression? There aren't clear definitions, there aren't clear answers as to what causes depression. In the scientific literature, you'll find there's really no clear answer. But what they've determined is it seems to be a mixture of nature and nurture. Now, what does that mean is depression is partly the genetic and also partly environmental, as in how you were brought up in your life. So there's some people that say, oh, you know what, my parents had depression, so I have depression. It's in my genes. Yes, but also it's not just in your genes, quote unquote. Yes, maybe there's certain genes that predispose you to depression, but morally, like, it's also how you were brought up by your parents. So also this is very important. So where you were brought up, maybe you grew up in a dangerous neighborhood, and that affected the way you view the world, your worldview, which then affected your psychology, which led to depression. So there are many factors, and we don't really know what is the singular cause of depression. There are many. So anything that goes from stress, diseases, traumatic events, breakups, Any sort of events that happen in your life also could lead to depression. So there's also environmental factors. So what are some of the signs of depression? I'm going to lead you a list from WebMD that are telling you, just to sort of summarize some of the signs. So number 1, trouble concentrating, remembering details, and making decisions. Number 2, fatigue. Number 3, feelings of guilt, worthlessness, and helplessness. Number 4, pessimism and hopelessness. Number 5, insomnia, early morning wakefulness or sleeping too much. Crankiness or irritability, number 6. Number 7, restlessness. Number 8, loss of interest in things once pleasurable, including sex. Number 9, overeating or appetite loss. Number 10, aches, pains, headaches, or cramps that won't go away. That's interesting, right? Because there's also physiological components to depression. It's not just psychological, like in your head. So you might actually have certain aches and pains as well, which I found fascinating. Number 11, digestive problems that don't get better even with treatment, right? That's insane. Persistent, sad, anxious, or empty feelings, number 12. And number 13, suicidal thoughts or suicide attempts. And those are some of the signs of depression. While there can be more, if you have any sort of these signs persistently for weeks or months, please call for help. And if you need to speak to someone on the phone, and I'm going to leave phone numbers at the bottom, international suicide hotlines, in case you feel like you need to talk to someone. If you have these signs for a prolonged amount of time, make sure you do so. It's very important. So let's look at certain solutions that people have tried to deal with depression and why it's not working. Number 1, antidepressants, medication. Antidepressants and medication have been found to be working in very varying degrees. Very varying. That's quite a redundant sentence anyway. Very varying degrees, meaning that some people it works, some people it doesn't work. Very sort of not really working super well for a lot of people, and some people it's kind of working and working really well. It's very inconsistent, let's just say. That's number 1. Number 2 is therapy. Also varying results. Some people, they go through therapy for several years and they say it hasn't helped a single bit. I've read thousands of stories of people who say they've gone through depression, did all the therapy in the world, it just hasn't helped. So also this comes with varying degrees. A third way that people try to deal with depression is by self-medicating. So drinking alcohol, doing drugs, video games, escapism. Of course, that doesn't work, as you're only putting a band-aid on a solution and you're not fixing the root cause. Fourth way that people are trying to deal with depression is they're trying to do it themselves, as in they watch a bunch of self-help videos, they're trying to improve their lives and all that, which the intention is very good, but if not paired up with other recovery strategies, I think it's bound to fail. Because you don't see your blind spots when you're trying to learn everything yourself in a way. So you want to also look at other practices. And what do most people do wrong is that they only look at one aspect of depression. They only zoom in and target on a specific area of their life, and they think that if they fix that, it's going to help. So the first mistake is to only look at the physiological components. In that way, it's only looking at depression as a chemical imbalance, for example. So that's the chemical imbalance theory that's been promoted in psychology circles, that it's basically, they think that it's just in the brain. If they fix their brain, that it's going to fix everything, which have been proven to not been the case. Actually, this theory has been proven to be wrong. In fact, I will take away what I just said and I say it hasn't been proven. This theory of chemical imbalance hasn't been proven. It also hasn't been disproven. Now we're getting into some conspiracy theory territory. Now we're saying that basically we think that it's a chemical imbalance, but we can't really tell. So that's the wrong way of going about it. The second way of going about it is going through trying to deal with depression, only looking at the psychology and what's going in the mind. Now there's definitely evidence that depression is psychological, let's face it, but only trying to deal with it through the psychological means is also wrong in my opinion. A third way that people look at depression is only environmental. So then they think that, if they get more money, if they move to a better place, if they get a six-pack or they get a girlfriend and all that, that if they think that it's going to fix the depression, which isn't the case. You need much more than just, getting the money, getting the girls to be happy. And this is me really overgeneralizing here. Of course, material things also go much deeper than, these things. And the fourth way is only looking at the spiritual aspects. So this is something that the new age / spiritual community likes to look at, even self-help community. They think that if they just become more present to the moment, they meditate more and all that, it doesn't matter how their life is going and their life is shit and all that, they don't have a job. If they're just more present to the moment and connected to God, they think that this can heal their depression. Well, that's also wrong. Now let's talk about the dark truth about antidepressants. This is something I've had on my heart for so long, and that's, I think, it's just so many things that are wrong about the antidepressant industry. It's just terrible. First of all, antidepressants do not outperform placebos. It has been proven not to significantly outperform placebos. Now, what does that mean? It means if you give someone an SSRI, you give them Prozac, okay? You say, okay, you take that, you're gonna feel better. And a second person, you tell them the exact same thing. You're giving them Prozac, but actually giving them a sugar pill, and you tell them, this is Prozac, take it, you'll feel better. What I'm saying is that the sugar pill will do the exact same thing or similar to the exact same thing as actually taking Prozac. Now that's absolutely insane. Now you're taking the risk of altering your brain chemistry for the medium to long term because you need to take them for a few weeks to a few months to see the effects. You risk altering the chemical balance in your brain to maybe outperform a placebo. I think this is completely insane, and I think that for the majority of the part, I don't think this is the right approach. Now, if you have other mental illnesses, for example, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, even anxiety maybe, okay, this is a different kind of worms that I'm not going to get into, and yes, probably medication for that can probably help way more. But in terms of depression, it's a different story. It's just a different kind of worm. So while some people do amazingly well on antidepressants, some people it helps them, it's not always the case for everyone. And also let's take into consideration many side effects that some of the SSRIs or SNRIs have on the brain. And some people have even reported feeling worse, even more depressed after taking medication. Even some people who became even more suicidal. So me, for example, I started taking fluoxetine or Prozac, if you want the brand name for it. I just took it, I took it once actually. And how I felt at the beginning, I felt about 10% better for the beginning of the day, whether that was placebo or actual improvement, I'm not exactly sure. And then at the evening, near the evening, maybe the medication had worn off by then, I felt terrible. I felt like some of the worst existential depression I felt in so long. And it was just so weird for me. Maybe my body doesn't react well to these chemicals. But then after this experience, I just felt so terrible. I didn't even want to go through the 2 to 3 weeks of loading protocol that my doctor told me. So I just stopped using it. And I tried other things and other methods that have worked better for me. So that's just my story, but of course it's different for everyone. The other issue with medication is that when taken a bit far, it can lead to polypharmacy, meaning that you might have certain side effects for specific medication, and then your doctor will give you another medication to offset the side effects of medication number 1. And then maybe medication number 2 gives you some other side effects. You have to do protocol number 3 in order to deal with these side effects. So you can see how that can become a slippery slope. All of these side effects, all of these issues that antidepressants don't outperform placebos and all that, those are very well hidden by the pharmaceutical industry, right? And it's just crazy. And they also make a lot of money from these medications. That's a bit suspicious. Why would you keep promoting a drug that barely outperform placebos or not at all? Why would you keep doing that unless you had a lot of benefits, whether it be monetarily or whatever, in terms of promoting that thing? So it's something to think about. Now let's look at the issues with the serotonin hypothesis. So what is the serotonin hypothesis? Serotonin hypothesis in psychology and pharmacology and all that is the theory that the reason why you're depressed is because your serotonin are out of whack, that are out of balance. Now, what does serotonin do? Serotonin is a neurotransmitter that is responsible for this sort of feeling of calm, peace, and just being, relaxed and in a good mood. Basically, that's what they say. The purpose of SSRIs, or serotonin reuptake inhibitors, is to increase the increase the quantity of serotonin in your brain by blocking certain receptors. Therefore, the hypothesis is that will help your mood, right? And SNRIs, which are serotonin norepinephrine, I'm not exactly sure about the terminology here, that also touches upon the norepinephrine pathway, but the mechanisms are very similar. So let's just sort of put them together for the sake of simplicity and explanation. The hypothesis is that serotonin is the main neurotransmitter that is responsible for happiness, but there are many other neurotransmitters that help with happiness. For example, oxytocin, which also some people say it's the neurotransmitter of love, affection that you feel when you're in a romantic relationship, or when women are breastfeeding, for example, you get a lot of that released. Also dopamine, responsible for motivation and taking action and making a difference in your life. Also, there's adrenaline, there's GABA, which is released when in deep states of meditation, when you drink green tea, for example, responsible for this feeling of calm and sort of regulating everything in your system in terms of anxiety and all that and negative thoughts. So why would you only zoom in on serotonin while there's so many other neurotransmitters that are responsible for happiness and well-being? To me, it makes no sense. And now I want to go really physical and philosophical and metaphysical here, because what is depression? What are we trying to do when we're trying to give these medications? We're trying to solve depression and to give happiness. Now, what is happiness? You can't. The issue with the scientific paradigm is that you're trying to solve the issue of giving happiness, which is the opposite of depression. And to discover what the happiness is, you can't answer it only scientifically. To touch upon the metaphysical realms, the philosophical realms, is inevitable. So for that reason, you have to also look at what is happiness? What does it mean for that particular individual? Maybe happiness for that person means to be productive. Then you might look at more dopaminergic pathways and look at how to increase dopamine. Maybe for someone, happiness means to be very calm, very sort of in this meditative state. So then you might look into more meditation, or sort of the GABA pathways, for example. Maybe this person needs more love, so then you need that's happiness for them. So then you need to put them out there in a sort of social setting. So you see how the serotonin hypothesis fails when it comes to solving the issue, right? Does that make sense? The serotonin hypothesis is reductionistic in nature. It's material reductionism, where you take a big idea of how to deal with depression and you reduce it to only the material biological means, where depression is much more than biological, in my opinion. It's also psychological, spiritual, and so forth. And this leads me to the black box theory, that we believe that basically in psychology, there's this sort of implicit, agreed upon idea that the mind is a black box. Meaning we don't know what the hell is in that box. We just know that there are certain inputs and then certain outputs that come out from that system. I'll get more into black box theory later in this video, but just to sort of give you an overview. Now, how do I think that antidepressants should be prescribed? Now, huge disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist. What I'm saying is purely experimental, so I could be wrong in every single facet. So don't take this, literally take this with a grain of salt. But in my opinion, if we were to describe any sort of, medication and all that, I think you should address the specific pathways that the client wants to improve. So you'd use psychotherapy to sort of assess what the client needs in their life. If they need more energy, they need more productivity, and that's the reason why they're depressed, then you give them some sort of dopaminergic. For example, Modafinil, which has been proven to really help with depression, which is a recent studies. You can look it up online. I don't have the study in front of me. So that's just an example. If the root cause of their unhappiness and depression is because of anxiety and worry, then you look into maybe the anxiolytics, what is helping with their anxiety and stabilizing their mood and their cortisol levels, and then you'll see more results in that way. So I think the approach needs to be more surgical and specific, and not just give you an antidepressant after 5 minutes of diagnosis, which I've had with my doctor. But really dive in deep and see what is at the root cause, and specifically target the neural pathways that would help in that specific client scenario. And I think the client should be, have the agency and the self-determination to choose what kind of medication they want to put into their body. And, as they go through this process, be able to adjust and try different medications or supplements, for example. That's my opinion. So what is depression and black box theory? What do they have to do together? Let me just explain you what black box theory is. Basically, black box theory is what it says on Wikipedia. A black box is a system which can be viewed in terms of its inputs and outputs, or transfer of characteristics, without any knowledge of its internal workings. Basically, they're saying that you just don't know what's going on in the mind. If you take the black box as the mind, you just know what's going in and what's going out of it. Which leads me to the next point, that science has used black box testing on the mind in order to sort of to improve people's psychologies and deal with depression. And what black box testing is you don't care about how the mind works. Basically, you don't care about the inner workings. You just try a bunch of inputs. You look at the outputs. If the outputs are positive, then you continue this method. But this is basically how they take the scientific method and apply it to dealing with depression. So what I want to propose to you is that you can reclaim the scientific method, and instead of black box testing with medication or any sort of things like that, you can do this testing with more natural methods. You can try, simple methods that don't have to do with medication. And this is what you can do. For example, you can test, your hypothesis is, if I sleep earlier during the day, at night, then I will feel better and that will help my energy, that will help my depression. Okay, that's your hypothesis. So you try that. So the input is, okay, I'm going to sleep 8 hours instead of 6 hours. Okay. You do that, and what is the output? The output is, oh, well, I kind of feel better on 8 hours sleep instead of 6. So then this loops back around, and then you're like, okay, well, in a feedback loop, okay, well, 8 hours is better. So then you give that input again. Output comes out, I feel better. You give that input again, and then you do that repeatedly until you feel better. After you tested one variable, then you add a second variable, for example, exercise. For example, therapy, for example, socializing, and you can add all these variables sequentially. And how you do that is you want to try to keep the inputs as precise and as consistent as possible. So for example, if a bad input is, you say, I'm going to try to think more positively. Well, that's very vague, because with this input that's kind of vague, you're going to get vague mixed outputs. If you say something like, I'm going to do 10 minutes of cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT journaling in the morning, and I'm going to write down my thoughts for 10 minutes a day, and that's much more specific. Now with this specific input, then you will have much more specific output, in my opinion. Also, it's easier to track and you get more results from something like that. So you want to be as specific as you can in your scientific approach. Now let's get into the actual recovery process, how to deal with depression. The main premise of this video is to give you a holistic, integral approach to dealing with depression, meaning that we're not going to look at only the physiological, only the psychological, only the environmental, and only the spiritual. We're going to look into all four simultaneously. That's it, all four simultaneously. I think this is the best approach to dealing with your depression. Which leads me to the theory of the biopsychosocial model of psychology, which basically that to deal with any sort of problem health-wise, you want to look at the biology, the psychology, and the social aspects, and the social aspects as well. Which brings me to the idea of having a systematic approach to healing and dealing with depression. Systematic meaning that you understand the mind and the body as a system where everything is interlinked. So when you affect one sphere, for example, you affect the physiological sphere, this will also affect the psychological and environmental spheres and spiritual spheres. So you touch upon each different aspects, and there's no way you can influence one sphere and not influence all the others, whether it be positive or negative. So for example, if you have all the good practices, you exercise, you eat well, you sleep well, but you're terribly lonely, the loneliness is going to affect your depression no matter what other practices you have into your life. That's just what it is. And vice versa. You eat terrible food, you don't exercise, you sleep terribly, but you have friends, but the physiological aspect is, since it suffers, then you're not going to get the maximum results. And as you'll see in your system, there are usually not only one sticking point, but there are many sticking points. For example, people with depression not only struggle with their negative thoughts, they also struggle with holding a job. They also struggle with their sleep. They also struggle with making friends. So you want to look at every single aspect and leverage them simultaneously, or at least sequentially, and not only look at one aspect. So that's the approach we'll be taking with depression. And as you dive into it, you need to not fall for the trap of material reductionism and be willing to go through the transrational spiritual realms in order to deal with your depression. And this means that you don't want to fall into the idea that depression is only physiological or biological. You also want to look at all the other spheres and be willing to touch upon the metaphysical and the philosophical. Because what is happiness? This is what science is trying to answer through biological scientific means. They're trying to resolve the issue of happiness through medication. That's what they're trying to do with dealing with depression. But ask yourself this question: what is happiness? What does it mean to you? Truly ask this question and ask yourself, how can I go about achieving this in my life? So there's this main preconception that science believes that if you go in the spiritual realm and all that, this is just woo-woo, new agey stuff, that's just magical stuff. It's just not grounded in reality, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Ken Wilber explains this fallacy as the pre-trans fallacy. He believed that anything that isn't rational is by default pre-rational, meaning that it is just barbaric or primitive, and it's just sort of before we evolve with brains, basically. They think that it's just sort of childlike thinking. But what he proposes, Ken Wilber, is that there's a level beyond rationality where you transcend logic and you reach a higher level that you can understand things not only logically, but instinctively, spiritually, and beyond, non-dualistically. And I don't want to get into talking about God here and all that and the universe, but to give you an idea, the scientific paradigm will only bring you so far. So be willing to transcend it and question everything it has taught you about depression. So let's get fucking started. So to deal with depression, how to deal with depression? Here we get into the nitty-gritty. First, there are 4 spheres, as I've told you: the physiological, psychological, environmental, spiritual. First, you want to look at all of these spheres and you sort of go through them and you work through them one by one. What I recommend is you start with the physiological. Why? Because the physiological is more easily accessible, it's easy to do, it's very specific, so you can do it right away. The psychological second, which is important, but it can be a little more tricky, and you might need help from a therapist or a coach or someone that can help you in that area. The third one is the environmental, which you want to do, sort of depending on your situation, but it can be hard to change, especially if it requires you moving out, requires you sort of going out there, making new friends, or taking risk and doing certain things environmentally in the material world that might take more preparation. That's a bit harder. Maybe that's the one you want to keep third. And the fourth one is the spiritual dimension, which is important. But I would say is more of in the advanced stages. You don't want to touch. I don't recommend you focus solely on the spiritual dimension for now. That you look at all the other aspects before you get into the spiritual dimension. The process I want to propose to you is you want to start with all the solution I'll give you. You want to look at the simplest, the lowest hanging fruits. So you will start with the easiest methods. If it's just drinking more water, you start with that, for example. So there are going to be many methods I'm going to tell you. You start with the lower hanging fruit, and you will stack all of the methods together until you reach the results that you want. If you have any other mental illnesses in tangent with depression, I do not recommend the techniques below. This is a huge disclaimer. Talk to your doctor, talk to your psychiatrist before you attempt any of these methods. Some of these methods might actually alter you in a very negative way if you have something else. So you want to be extremely careful. Make sure you don't have any other health conditions. So let's start with the physiological aspects of dealing with depression. Number one, you want to get tested for any sort of mental or physiological health-related conditions. Look, maybe if you have low thyroid, hyperthyroidism. Look for any sort of autoimmune diseases. Do you have any diseases that maybe are contributing to your depression? Look at any sort of physical problems, certain pains, back pains, knee pains, whatever you have that might be contributing to your depression. And this is important because if you fix those areas in your life, if you find medication for these or treatment for these, then that will definitely help in terms of healing your depression. Because, for example, let's say you have chronic fatigue and you're incredibly tired. If you get more energy, this will surely help your depression. So you want to look at any sort of what's right in front of you. What are the problems in front of you that if you were to fix would help you feel better? Look at these first. Second, now into the more nitty-gritty, you want to look at whether you have good sleep or not. Sleep is incredibly important and restorative, and you want to make sure that you're getting at least 7.5 to 8 hours of sleep per night. So that's about 4 to 5 full REM sleep cycles, deep sleep cycles. And you want to make sure that you go to bed before midnight. You want to make sure you go to bed because how we evolved on this planet is to live during the day. Humans are day creatures, they're not nocturnal creatures. And I understand how that can cause a problem if you're a shift worker, for example. But if you have any sort of seasonal affective disorder where you feel depressed when you don't see the light often and there's not enough light and you need to work at night, then you might have to maybe consider switching jobs or trying to get a day shift, for example. That will really affect your mood, which leads me to getting vitamin D. Vitamin D is incredibly important to all of for mental and biological processes, which I'm not going to get into the science here. You can look it up online for yourself, but vitamin D is incredibly important. You get it. The best source by far is getting into the sunlight. So sun exposure and walking in nature, contact with nature, and taking daily walks has been proven to help with mood overall and depression. I don't have the studies in front of me, but I know that exposure to the sun and nature really helps depression. So you want to maybe look into that. That will also improve your sleep. Also, methods of improving your sleep is limiting exposure to blue light, also known as light that comes from LED screens or computers. I'm looking at computers right now, that's why I'm pointing here. And you want to limit exposure to that at least 1 to 2 hours before bed, 3 to 4 if you can. And what you can do is you buy blue blocking glasses, which are basically sunglasses with an orange tint. Make sure they are labeled blue blockers. You can find them on Amazon for cheap, as low as $20. And personally, since I've used these, it has incredibly helped my sleep. It's helped my sleep in tremendous ways. And if you do that, I'm sure that's going to help you just sort of get that restful sleep. Because sleep helps you sort of consolidate memory, help your brain in all certain ways. And when you have bad sleep, you just don't think right. You start thinking negative thoughts. You don't feel like you are yourself at your full capacity. So fix your sleep. And make sure you have a constant sleep-wake cycle. What does that mean? It means you go to bed at the same time, you wake up at the same time on the weekend and during the week. I know this is super hard if maybe you go out, let's say you go out on the weekends to socialize and all that, try not to go to bed too late. That's what I'd recommend. If you have to go to bed at 3 a.m., you want to make sure the next day, try to wake up at the same time. Even if you're gonna feel tired, it's okay if you're waking up at 8 a.m. and then you go to bed at the same time at 11 or 12, whatever you go to bed. Try to keep your sleep cycle consistent as to maintain. So make sure you go to bed at the same time and you wake up at the same time, even after a night out. Try to do that and you will reset your sort of circadian rhythm to a healthy functioning level. The third aspect of the physiology of how to deal with depression is healthy diet. You've heard it all, I'm sure. You've been told, oh, you need to eat more veggies and all that. And I understand how this can sound so simplistic and fundamental, but there's so many people with depression that just don't look at the dietary aspects and how that can affect their depression. And you have to look at the dietary aspect. It is inevitable, like sleep, like exercise, everything. So the first thing you can do, like the simplest way to deal with depression, is the lowest hanging fruit in front of you is stop eating junk food, stop eating processed food. Try to avoid these at all costs. Limit them to only once a week if you can. Twice a week at most if you really have to have it. And why this is important is that junk food, processed food, creates inflammation in the brain and in your body that just doesn't help you think right. And you've probably had this feeling after you eat this really junk food that's terrible for your health, you just feel bad. You feel lethargy, you feel brain fog and all that. If you just eliminate this, you'll feel better. So that includes any sort of fast food, processed carbohydrates or processed food, Basically, when you go into the grocery store, you find a certain food and it has more than like 10 ingredients, then this is being really processed. So this is something you want to be careful with. You want to stick to whole foods, like for example, meat, vegetables, rice, potatoes. This is really sort of a whole food is just one damn ingredient and you have control over that. And if you just eliminate these junk foods, this is really going to help you. Now, you can get into the granular aspects as to what to eat, which we'll kind of get into here. But in general, number one, just stop fucking eating junk crap. And I'm telling you, you're gonna feel better. This is not just my bro sciencey opinion. This is backed up by science. If you eat better, you're gonna feel better, period. And as a general guideline, I want to tell you that most people, they eat too many carbohydrates. It's just way too many that they need. 10, 15 servings per day. They eat so much pasta, so much bread, so much, pizza and all that. And carbohydrates, sugar, it's really an overabundance in the American, North American, Canadian, whatever diet. In the Western world, at least, it's just in abundance. And you want to cut that down. Personally, I'm on the ketogenic diet. I found this really to help. There's been certain tentative studies about ketogenic diet helping with depression, though it's not conclusive, but I highly recommend trying to cut down on the amount of carbohydrates and glucose that you consume. add more healthy fats like omega-3s, fish, and meats, certain healthy meats, and also healthy fats, right? Like olive oil and all of that good stuff. Which leads me to looking at certain micronutrients that will help you with depression. So, for example, omega-3s, incredibly important, especially EPA in omega-3, which helps with regulating mood, and DHA, which is secondary, but also just as important, that helps with more cognition and sort of thinking in general. Vitamin D, as I've said, very important, and you want to look maybe into B complex vitamins. So you might take a B complex supplement, which also this will help with your overall cognition and just processes in the brain. So these are just things you might look into, but I'll get into the supplement section slightly later in this video. So just keep an eye for that. The fourth physiological component to dealing with depression is so obvious. You probably know what it is. Exercise. Exercise. You have to exercise often, at least 3 to 4 times a week. It doesn't have to be rigorous exercise. It can just be sort of a walk, and hopefully daily. Hopefully daily you're taking walks, you're walking through the park, you're doing these sort of things that will help you just sort of mentally and physically to feel better. And exercise has been proven to help mood and dopamine levels, increase that feel-good hormone in your body and brain. And mostly, exercise helps with brain-derived neurotropic factor, BDNF. It releases BDNF, which helps with creating new neurons and learning, memory, mood, everything, all of that good stuff. And pretty much nothing else outperforms exercise, just exercising in terms of medication or whatever other thing. Exercise is this magic pill. I'm telling you, it's so goddamn important. If you can't exercise, at least stand up every few minutes. You're in front of your computer, stand up and do some stretches, walk to the kitchen, just walk a little bit. I'm telling you, if you just do a 10-minute daily walk in the morning in nature, or just get out of your freaking house, just 10 minutes, you're gonna feel so much better. You do that in the morning, you get the sun on your face, you get the exercise benefits. There's nothing quite like it. So try to have a consistent exercise schedule. Personally, I focus more on weightlifting, sort of the muscle building exercises, but also aerobic exercises like cardio. Just going on walks is also incredibly helpful and good for you. I believe if you do both, it would be the best option, but at least do a daily walk or something like that, or something that's low intensity, and do this consistently. You'll feel better. The fifth solution for the physiological component of dealing with depression is cold showers. Cold showers, how would you have thought of it? Well, it's been proven that cold showers help with dopamine. It's been proven that it really increases your baseline of dopamine substantially for the several hours to come after the cold shower. And that's just with like a 1-minute cold shower, basically. And that's just crazy to think about, especially, when you're really in a funk and lethargic place in your sort of psychology, you're feeling like shit. When you take a cold shower, it's impossible to take a cold shower and not have adrenaline be released in your system. That sort of wakes you up. It's pretty much impossible. Every time you take a cold shower, it's going to wake you up in some way. It really snaps you out into presence. It helps you to snap you into the present moment, and it incredibly substantially increased dopamine levels for the hours to come after the cold shower. So if you struggle with motivation, you struggle with willpower, you struggle with being productive, cold showers are a terrific, amazing addition to your arsenal. And what cold shower does is that it stimulates the mitochondria in your body. When you get in contact with the cold, it helps to stimulate the mitochondria, which are the powerhouse of the cell, which are the powerhouse of your body, which are responsible for energy. So you will notice after a cold shower, you usually feel much more energetic, you have more energy, and you just feel better overall. It's because of the mitochondrial stimulation that you get from the cold. So how do you do the cold shower? Well, there are different protocols. The first one is just cold turkey. You open the cold shower as cold as you can, you jump into it, and that's the most unpleasant. But for some people, it works. I would say if you're a beginner to this, probably not a good idea. You can do it. Personally, I don't like this method. The second method is called the James Bond shower. Basically, the James Bond shower is you start with a hot shower. Basically, you go in the water, it's hot, so you sort of this good feeling that you get from a hot shower. And then you turn to cold. You end the shower with a cold shower. So you start with hot and you get cold, and you stay in the shower for a few seconds, and then you get out. So that's the James Bond method. The other method that I like the most is hot and cold. So you go into the shower, you start hot for a few seconds, and then you get to cold, like sort of lukewarm cold, not too cold. And then as you get into the shower, you breathe through your nose, you breathe very calmly, and you try not to activate your sort of fight or flight response in your brain. You try to be really calm to the cold. And then you go back to hot, right, for a few seconds. And then you go back to cold, but slightly colder than before, okay? For 5 to 10 to 15 seconds, and then you go back to hot, and then you go back to cold again, and you go as cold as you can without, overstressing yourself. And, when you start to hyperventilate, means that it's a little too cold, so then you want to dial it back. So this is what I like about this method. It's very sort of gradual, and you will get all of the benefits of the cold shower without sort of jumping into the cold plunge. When you really don't feel like it, just tell yourself, you don't have to do the fucking cold shower. If you don't feel like it, that's the coldest, you can kind of, you can dial your degree of difficulty. And I think that helps with building the habit, because you get the positive reinforcement of the hot, and then you get the cold and the hot, and it just helps. And then you end always on cold, always end your shower on cold. So those are the protocols for the cold shower. Now let's get into the supplements section. Okay, now we've looked into the physiological aspect, how to deal with depression. Now let's look into certain supplements, and this is the last portion. You want to look into that only after you've done everything else. So only after you've fixed your sleep, you've exercised, and you've fixed your diet. Okay, those three are so goddamn important. After you do these, okay, then you can maybe look into these supplements. So I'm going to link to Andrew Huberman's podcast for that, because a lot of the tips that I gave in this video are also inspired from his podcast on depression and motivation. So I'm going to link to that if you want more of these scientific details as to why these supplements work. Okay, so first one is omega-3. Omega-3 is so important, and Americans and North Americans and people in the West, they get a disproportionate amount of omega-6 fat, which is pro-inflammatory and leads to inflammation in the brain and the body, and way too little omega-3s. So you want to balance this out by adding more omega-3s to your diet. So that includes fish, for example, but you want to look into the good fish with the least amount of mercury. For example, cod, trout are good options, shrimps are good options, oysters, mussels. You want to look into that. You might need to do some research on the low heavy metal containing fish, the low mercury content fish. You might want to Google that, because I don't have the list in front of me. So this is the best way. Also, what I recommend is taking an omega-3 supplement. So just fish oil you get at the groceries, the pharmacy. You can look into sort of more granular details of higher quality omega-3 supplements. But even just a simple omega-3 supplement, I believe, can do the job. Next one you will look into is creatine monohydrate. So what is creatine monohydrate is a supplement that helps you not only in your workouts and your building muscle and all that, but it's also been proven to help with mental function, help you sort of your psychology, and it's almost sort of this nootropic that helps you mentally be a bit more sharp and all that. So this is something you might want to look into, creatine monohydrate. And the third supplement I recommend, which is, you can just eat it also, is turmeric. Turmeric has been proven to help with brain inflammation and just inflammation in general. It's an amazing supplement, and it really helps with the brain fog that comes with depression. Personally, it's helped me a lot. So what you want to do is you take some cold water, just an ounce of cold water, you add half a teaspoon of turmeric, a few cracks of black pepper, because black pepper will make the turmeric more bioavailable when you ingest it. And if you're adventurous, you can add cayenne pepper, a little bit of cayenne pepper, a little bit of ginger powder or actual ginger. And importantly, put a bit of lemon juice in there, like I put lemon concentrate, or you can squeeze a lemon in there, or whatever citrus, because it tastes super strong. It doesn't taste super good without the lemon. So I recommend, to build the habit and make it taste good in the morning, do that. So a little bit of cold water, the turmeric, black pepper, cayenne pepper, ginger powder, and drink it every single morning. You will feel absolutely amazing. I can't stress this enough. I've done that for the last week. Man, it's totally changed my brain. And credits to the Brain Fog Fix, it's the book. I highly recommend you read that if you have any issues with brain fog. This recipe is taken from that book, and it's really helped me. So yeah, you want to try that out. Now, continuing on the trend of supplementation that can help with depression, I want to touch upon nootropics. Now, I want to issue a warning here that what I'm going to tell you are purely anecdotal and experimental. So this is the absolute last thing you want to look at. Do all the fundamentals like sleep, exercise, and all that before you even attempt or even think about touching upon nootropics. So nootropics, what they are basically is that they are supplements that can help to improve brain function, productivity, and just help you think in a more creative, plastic, more productive way, right? So, and the reason why I think that can help with depression is because depression has many issues when it comes to cognitive function. Some people report low concentration, fatigue, and all that. And helping the brain think in a more effective way, I believe, can help you with your mood and just feeling better about your life. So nootropics, how I think you should take nootropics is similarly to my advice on antidepressants. You should take it surgically to affect certain pathways, the specific pathways that you want to affect. For example, if you struggle with motivation, that's your cause for your depression, look at dopaminergics, or nootropics that help with dopamine production. If you struggle with anxiety, look at anxiolytics or tranquility nootropics that we like to call it, like for example ashwagandha, L-theanine, Bacopa monnieri, Rhodiola rosea. Those are sort of nootropics that help you sort of lower the stress levels or balance your stress hormones to get at a more even level. So depending on your situation, you want to do your research and look at which nootropics will help for which scenario. So the first nootropic that is also a prescription drug that has helped me the most when it comes to depression is Modafinil. Now, I want to issue a warning here because Modafinil is very strong. It is a prescription drug, also known as a nootropic in the nootropic world. That is very, very strong. It's prescribed for narcolepsy, for people who, basically a disease that, you can't stay awake for a certain amount of time and you fall asleep at random times during the day. So it's very serious stuff that I believe that in very low doses or calculated doses that it can really help you with your depression. There's also been recent studies on Modafinil being incredibly helpful when it comes to helping with depression. Also, if you go on, I don't remember what the website is that reviews drugs, but there's been thousands, I'm going to try to put the link in the description below, but there's been dozens and even hundreds of reviews of people that say that Modafinil has completely changed their lives. It's a miracle drug that helped them. They've tried so many antidepressants and now they do Modafinil, and then everything changes in their lives. It's insane, the reviews that you read on Modafinil. Some people say it's a complete miracle drug. Other people say not so much. So it really depends on the individual, in my opinion. Modafinil is incredibly safe because it's been prescribed nearly 1 million times in the US. Across the world, I think even more, since the 1970s. So it's really a drug that's been proven. One caveat is there's is it one chance out of 500,000 or two chance in a million to get a very rare, serious skin disease called Stevens-Johnson syndrome. Now, this is incredibly terrifying if you look at photos of Stevens-Johnson syndrome on the internet. So this is incredibly rare, but to steer clear, you might want to get a DNA test before you try to take modafinil, or ask your doctor, tell them, hey, is that something that maybe I could try out? You can tell them you struggle with energy levels and you might be prescribed modafinil. I don't know what the protocol is, but you can get it through a doctor, for example. Modafinil is a dopamine reuptake inhibitor that basically helps you increase the amount of dopamine in your system. Therefore, on modafinil, many people report feeling very motivated, much more motivated, more energetic, in consequence of the increased dopamine content in their brains. So modafinil will mostly help with productivity, being very concentrated, this very focused mind. And this is the main mechanism of modafinil. Now let's look at the side effects. The side effects of modafinil, some people, they report no side effects, but the common thing that happens in modafinil is people feel a bit more anxiety because it raises your cortisol levels and stress levels in some way. So if you have anxiety, do not take modafinil. Do not take it. I don't recommend it because it's going to increase your anxiety levels. And personally, I felt my anxiety levels slightly rise on modafinil. It's not significant, but slightly. So it's something you want to be careful with. Also, it can impair your sleep if you take it too late, as the half-life of modafinil is 14 hours. That means you still have half of the dose you took in the morning when you go to sleep, which is insane. So you want to take it super early in the morning, take really low dosages in order to, offset these side effects. Some people report headaches, which I've certainly had, on modafinil, which you can get in the later portion of the day. So to offset this, you can take magnesium, which has been really helpful. I've been taking 250 milligrams in the evening. It's really helped me a lot. Vitamin B complex tends to help. Anecdotally, some people say that taking a choline source, for example, choline bitartrate, alpha GPC, or any other sort of choline in supplements or even food has been proven to help. Also, make sure you hydrate because modafinil tends to dehydrate you. So that's just one thing you can take. So this is modafinil. A second nootropic that I want to recommend is huperzine A. Now, huperzine A is a choline reuptake inhibitor, a temporary choline reuptake inhibitor. So what that does is it increases the amount of choline in the brain temporarily when you're taking it. I'm actually on huperzine A right now as we're speaking on this camera. And what that does is, what choline does, it's basically, it helps with brain function. It's a sort of essential nutrient in order for your brain to think, to process things, and to function better. So better brain performance, for me, has helped with better mood overall. And you'll see this to be a general trend when it comes to supplementation and nootropics. Another supplement that I recommend is Noopept. Now, Noopept is a cholinergic compound, meaning that it works on the choline pathway and it needs choline to function well. And what it helps with is it helps to boost dopamine and also serotonin, which are two neurotransmitters, as we've talked about, that helps with dealing with depression and all that. Now, this is mostly anecdotal, but I found Noopept to really help with my brain function and sort of thinking more clearly. Also helps me relax in a strange way, so it increases concentration and relaxation at once. So you're just more present in the moment. It's just a great nootropic, in my opinion, so that might be something that you want to try out. Number 4 nootropic that I recommend is actually a family, a class of nootropics, which are the racetams. Racetams, basically paracetam, aniracetam, oxiracetam, phenylpiracetam. All these nootropics have been proven to work for years. Actually, piracetam is one of the oldest, I think the oldest nootropic in the book that was synthesized a long time ago. So it's been proven to work for help people with cognitive decline, dementia, Alzheimer's, and all that. I don't have the studies in front of me, but you can look it up. So racetams, what do is that they help with improving brain function, but they're also anxiolytics in a way that racetams tend to help with anxiety. They lower anxiety and they improve concentration, which is a great combo, isn't it? So phenylpiracetam, though, I will put phenylpiracetam on a separate wavelength because phenylpiracetam is very stimulatory. I think it might increase anxiety for some people. So it depends, everyone is different, but if you want to, my recommendation is you can start with piracetam as it is the safest, most proven racetam to have worked. Other racetams are a bit more recent, and if you don't want to take the risk, I recommend start with piracetam, and you can experiment with others after. And the fifth supplement, nootropic, that I recommend is uridine monophosphate. Now, uridine monophosphate is also a cholinergic, and it is an anti-stress, and also brain function, sort of cognitive improving substance that helps also to modulate dopamine release. So it's very interesting. What that does is that it helps to modulate the dopamine in your system, also gives you more energy, more clarity, and so that might be also something you might look at. Now, I want to touch upon something that's a bit controversial, but has been proven scientifically to work really well in clinical trials and in certain tests and all that, is psychedelics. Psychedelics, especially magic mushrooms, also known as psilocybin. Now, I do not condone the use of illegal drugs and all that. If you want to use these drugs, do so in a safe and secure setting that is legal and hopefully with a healthcare practitioner. So 60 to 70% of people who took a one-time large dose of psilocybin have been proven to have lowered symptoms of severe depression, like really much lowered symptoms of depression, even months after the singular dose. So that's really impressive. If you look at any sort of antidepressant medication, I don't think any antidepressant comes even close to the effect that psilocybin can have. Now, of course, psilocybin is the thing with psilocybin is that it's very, it's like psychotherapy times 1,000. Basically, it's condensing like 10 years of psychotherapy in like 4 hours. That's basically what psilocybin does, in my opinion. And because it's very intense and it can have negative consequences for people who are predisposed to it, then you want to be incredibly careful. Do your research and talk with a physician or whatever doctor before you even attempt any of these things. Regardless of whether you have a good trip or a quote-unquote bad trip that is sort of traumatizing or difficult to go through, people still report benefits, really good benefits, several months later, even if the trip was challenging. In fact, some people say that the most challenging trips they've had have been the most transformative and helpful trips ever. So that's just as a tangent. Of course, I want to put a emphasis here. If you have a history of schizophrenia, this is incredibly dangerous. I wouldn't touch psilocybin or anything like that, because I think that this could trigger schizophrenic episodes because you see hallucinations while you're taking shrooms. So just be incredibly careful. Again, I'm not going to say that enough. Talk to your doctor first. Now, a second protocol to taking mushrooms isn't just taking a singular dose, but some people recommend taking many microdoses, throughout the week, throughout the month, which is called microdosing. So the sort of protocol that you'd recommend here is maybe you take 0.1 to 0.3 gram of dried psilocybin mushrooms, once every 4 days or so. That's the sort of recommended protocol, and that apparently should help with your depression. Now, there hasn't been clinical studies specifically on microdose really much, so it's not really scientifically proven. It's still in the works, but there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that says that it's been incredibly helpful. And personally, I've tried microdosing in the past and it's been quite helpful. I would say though, the singular large dose probably is the most transformative if you're really looking for a transformative experience, but the several micro doses also, just in terms of regulating mood, becoming a bit more in touch with your emotions, more present in the moment, has been proven to really help. It helps you sort of give you this, I was talking about the spiritual sphere of healing depression. It helps you get you more in touch with these spiritual dimensions, which really I think science really struggles to describe. But psychedelic mushrooms, they give you this sort of mind-blowing experience that is so deep spiritually that I don't think science will ever be able to explicate. So I think because it touches upon the spiritual sphere so deeply, I think if you do psychedelic mushrooms, that can help you heal the sort of spiritual elements within you so that you can feel better overall in your body, your mind, and your soul. And the last thing for the physiological aspects of dealing with depression is looking at antidepressants. Now, I'm not a doctor, of course, so if you've tried everything, if you've looked at all of the previous things that I recommended, or maybe you've tried it and it's not working, or if you have severe depression, you're already taking these, don't stop taking these, of course, right? Keep taking your antidepressants, or if you've tried everything, it's not working, then maybe you might try something like antidepressants, though I don't know if it's the right choice for everyone. Antidepressants have been proven not to really work super well on mild to moderate depression. For severe depression, though, it might be the right answer. I can't tell you. Now let's look at the psychological aspect of dealing with depression, the psychology behind depression. Now, because the psychological components are more vague and abstract in nature, the solution I'm going to give you will be less specific in a sense, will be a bit more, you have to sort of deconstruct the advice for yourself, and you might need to talk to a professional to help you with that. So the first thing to address these psychological component is to look at the trauma itself, the root cause of the trauma. Now, how that can cause depression and make it worse is trauma either happens in low-level chronic levels, for example, low-level stress at your job that leads to burnout and depression, or in acute form. So, for example, you have a car crash, you get PTSD from it, post-traumatic stress disorder, and this leads to your depression. So there can be sort of acute forms and low-level chronic forms of traumatic events. Now, how do you address the trauma? Well, definitely the best way is with a therapist, with a psychologist, most likely. There's also certain solutions in spiritual circles that talk about shadow work and confronting your shadow and your trauma, which is basically it's basically similar to what psychotherapy tries to do, but in a more sort of spiritual way, you could say. So definitely this is something to look at. The second solution that I have in order to deal with the psychological components of depression is cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT for short. Now, cognitive behavioral therapy has been proven for years to be incredibly effective in treating depression. It's been incredibly effective, and I think people who say that it's not effective or it hasn't worked for them, I think they haven't done it consistently. I think they haven't done it consistently, or they haven't looked at the other spheres of depression, right? So if you do it in tangent with the physiological, the environmental, the spiritual, I think it can be incredibly effective, and it's been proven for years to work. Now, what I recommend, definitely the easiest way to do it is with a CBT certified psychologist, psychotherapist, or therapist. Also, what I recommend is that you do cognitive behavioral therapy CBT journaling, which is a technique that is outlined in the book Feeling Great by David Burns, Dr. David Burns. Highly, highly recommend you read the book if you want to do this technique. But basically how you do it is that you look at the negative belief, whether it be I'm not enough, I'll never amount to anything, whatever negative belief that is at the root of your depression. You write these down. Secondly, what you do is you identify the distortion. and there's a list of about 12 to 15 distortions. I made a video about that. I'll probably link in the description. Basically, you identify what the distortion is, and thirdly, you write down a positive reframe for that negative belief, a more realistic reframe. And the reframe first has to be true, and the second, the reframe has to crush the negative thought. So those are the two criteria in order for a reframe to be effective. So for example, let me give you an example. So for example, I tell you, I'll never amount to anything and I'm no good. Okay, what cognitive distortion is that? Well, this is all or nothing thinking, because I'm saying literally nothing in the world I can do, that I'll never amount to anything. So that's all or nothing. There are other distortions you can try to list. For example, emotional reasoning, which basically feels that, because I feel worthless, therefore I must be worthless. So that's sort of the bias that we have. So I list those distortions, and step number 3, I write a reframe. Then what I could write, for example, is, well, I might feel like I won't amount to anything, but that's not true. I mean, I can amount to certain things. For example, I woke up this morning, I made some coffee, I set up this camera and shot a video. I mean, that's not nothing. Yes, I didn't win a Nobel Prize with my video, but I did something. So it makes no sense to say I'll never amount to anything, because clearly I do some things right, even if it's just brushing my teeth or whatever. So this is my reframe. And see, it's important when you do these, you do them on paper. All right, so this is called the 3-column technique by David Burns. So you start with you write the negative thought, you write the distortion associated with it, and you write the reframe, and then you have done CBT journaling. Now, the third aspect of dealing with the psychological component of depression is doing therapy. Of course, therapy is something that I recommend, and probably your doctor will recommend. Therapy, now you have to be careful with that, because some people, they report having done therapy for years, it hasn't really helped at all. The first type of therapy, which is more sort of talk therapy that you might get from certain social workers, for example, or people who aren't certified in, let's say, cognitive behavioral therapy or anything like that. Just talk therapy has been proven, I think, to not be as effective as other therapies. Why? Because you just kind of talk about your problems, and the psychologist or the therapist is not going to give you anything really in return, which I've found to be sort of the case. Now, what I would recommend is you go to a CBT certified practitioner or a psychologist who uses cognitive behavioral therapy in their practice. Now, me to get access to this psychologist at first who was CBT certified, he's an amazing psychologist, it cost a bit more. It was like, instead of $110 or $120 per hour, it was like about $150. So it was definitely a bit more expensive, but it was incredibly more helpful. So you might need to shop around and trying to find a really high quality psychotherapist. And what I'm gonna tell you is that if you don't resonate with a specific therapist, don't hesitate to change, because I think the methodology and the relationship you have with your therapist is really paramount to recovery in terms of depression. The fourth tool that I want to suggest you in order to deal with the psychological aspect of depression is getting into personal development and self-help. Of course, if you like my videos, you're probably into this field anyway, but definitely looking into reading more books on psychology, positive thinking, books like Anthony Robbins, or whatever books on self-help, whatever aspect of your life you want to improve. Let's say relationships, take a relationships book, and by doing that, by getting more knowledge about that, you're going to improve your relationships. So definitely getting into personal development is an incredible tool to have in order to feel better in your life, feel more positive. And I wish this was more taught, maybe in school or even in depression. If people struggle with depression, no one tells them to get into self-help and personal development, which is insane. They just tell you take a pill and go to the therapist. I think what's good with self-help is that it gives you self-governance, this sort of agency on yourself into changing your own life. So you're not letting change, be dictated by your therapist or the medication you're taking. You are proactively taking charge in your life when you get into personal development, which is why I believe it's absolutely wonderful to help you. The fifth tool that I want to give you is to set achievable goals and strive towards achieving them. Because progress leads to happiness, progress leads to a sense of fulfillment. If you just spend your time, I don't know, watching Netflix all day, playing video games all day, which, we've all been guilty of at some point, the thing with when you do that is that you're not achieving something substantial. You're not getting any sort of progress in your life. And therefore, I think it's very hard to feel good about yourself if you aren't seeing progress in your life. We are purpose-seeking machines as humans. We are existential beings. We need some sort of purpose in our lives beyond just instant gratification. So if you can set certain goals for yourself, even if it's just waking up at 7 a.m. every morning, exercising for 20 minutes, those are small goals you can set that will definitely help offset the negative symptoms of depression. The sixth tool that I have for you in order to deal with these psychological components is building healthy self-esteem. Grow your self-esteem, and probably it's been proven. I haven't looked at the literature, but definitely if you feel worse about yourself, it's going to be very hard to be happy. It's going to be very hard to get out of your depression if you feel like you are a piece of shit that's worth nothing. What I found, a lot of people with depression struggle with low self-esteem. But depression isn't necessarily caused by low self-esteem, though it can definitely be a contributing factor. I think if you improve your self-esteem, it's definitely going to help with your depression, because when you feel better about yourself, you can make the necessary changes in order to feel better and enter an upward spiral of feeling better in your life and improving your life. For that matter, I think that can help. And my suggestion for that is the 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem by Nathaniel Branden. Amazing book that you can read, and I think it's really going to help with your self-esteem. The next tool I have for you is, as cheesy as it sounds, is as simple as it sounds, practicing gratitude and positive thinking. Now, when you're depressed, it's very easy to, fall into these negative thoughts and all that, and, be incredibly pessimistic. But, I think this tip comes in tension with CBT. If you practice these CBT techniques like cognitive behavioral therapy, journaling, as I've explained, it's really going to help you think more positively. On top of that, you might want to look into Stoicism. Stoicism teaches you about taking control over your life and not letting the external environment dictate how you feel. Instead, you choose how to react to the negative events that happen to you. Therefore, you think more positively about whatever happens to you, because there's always a silver lining. You can always learn from the worst experiences in your life. And that was the case for me. After I quit my job, I realized that, I feel terrible, but some people, they feel just, they'd be happy to be fired from their jobs. And some people, they'd be happy to, be free. And I realized, quitting my job is fine. It was just sort of this mindset shift that I had. And then this really helped me get out of sort of my depression and all that. And when I quit my job, I just felt incredibly, just so much better. So that's just one example. And the last tip that I have for you to deal with these psychological components of depression is socializing and making relationships, making deep relationships. I think it's an indisputable fact, and it's been proven countlessly through, science and just literature and all that, that making deep connections, really helps with dealing with a low mood, depression. It helps with longevity, with happiness, with health, lower risk of cardiac disease and all that, just by bonding with people, having a close, intimate partner. If you're single, having close friends and all that. So what I recommend is you go out, you meet friends, you get super intimate, especially if the root cause of your depression is that you're lonely, or you have no girlfriend. Then fucking learn how to get these handled in your life. I see so many people who say, oh, I'll never get a girlfriend, I'm not attractive and all that. And they sort of subscribe to this black pill mentality that, they'll always be alone. That's just terrible, because then you're sort of, you're sort of putting yourself in a hole where you want to be happy, but the thing that will make you happy is impossible to achieve, therefore you never get it. I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but to get back on the point of socializing, you want to ignore these toxic beliefs. You want to go out there and expand your social circle, expand the people you connect with, connect with people on a deeper level, get vulnerable with them, because these connections will really help with depression. If you don't know what the hell to do in your life, you don't know how to cure your depression, whatever, you feel stuck, go meet a friend, talk about it. You just feel better, like period. You just feel better. So do that. So socializing, the last part about dealing with the psychology component, leads me to the two other spheres that we're going to talk about, which are environmental and spiritual. Because when you socialize more, it helps you sort of in your environment, your social circle, where the material world overall, it helps you. Also spiritually, deeply in your heart, it helps you as well in that area. Now, the two other spheres, the environmental and spiritual, are much less talked about and are really neglected in the psychology sphere, I believe. Mostly we talk more about how do you change the mind, or certain neurotransmitters, how we can alter them. So then these two areas, because they're less talked about and there's no sort of scientific methodologies as to how to access these or how to fix these, the advice I'm going to give you is going to be much less specific. Again, even more vague than in the psychological component, even more abstract in a sense. So you have to sort of decorticate and find the answers for yourself on that one, and you have to really experiment, see what works for you in that area. So talking about the environmental aspect, which also coincides with the social aspect, you could really put them in a single sphere, social and environmental, is building the right relationships. So building upon what I just said in the psychological component, for example, building a romantic relationship, that can definitely help. This is a hypothesis, but the oxytocin you get from the love and nurture and just the quality time and companionship that you get with a girlfriend or a boyfriend or just any romantic partner, really I think you can't really get that from like a close relationship or a friend. I think it's a different ballpark of intimacy and vulnerability that you can't get with a friend, and the sort of deep connection you get with that person is just something different. You can try to correct me if I'm wrong or if you have a different experience than me, but I think there's sort of an unmatched level of intimacy you can get in a relationship. Therefore, I think because it's so unmatched and so deep to the core and to the heart, I think a relationship has such a deep healing effect, have this really deep component, healthy romantic relationships that just heal you to the core, I think, so deeply that I think no other type of relationships, even with your parents or your friends, won't even compete. So that's just my experience. And personally, my deepest source of suffering in life was because I was single and I had no women in my life. And it didn't matter how close I was to my friends. I actually had a lot of friends, even when I was depressed. I remember I threw a party, there were like 60 people and mostly acquaintances, but a lot of my close friends. And didn't matter how many friends I had or how close I was with my friends, I still felt incredibly depressed in a strange way. So that's just one thing. A second thing to help with the environmental and social aspect of your life is just making friends, making regular friends, close friends, that's people that you can rely on, that you can talk to about some of your problems, you can share with them, you can come up with solutions, which is, most of what my friendships are about is we meet up, we sort of talk about personal development, we talk about our goals, we talk about the vision for the future, we go on adventures together, we do stupid shit together. All of these experiences, will help with your depression. That's just undeniable because, it's even been proven in the science and the literature that relationships are, as I've said, probably the number one thing to help with depression is just relationships. So don't underestimate that. And, all sorts of relationships, not just with your friends and romantic partner, but thirdly, with your parents, with your family. Those are the people closest to you, so you might also need to develop that, even develop some intimacy with them that maybe you didn't have, spend quality time with them. So that's something you can do. So when it comes to social skills, right? If you can't make friends, you have trouble with all that, what I recommend is the book Social Skills by Chris MacLeod. You can find him on socialskills.com, I believe. This is by far the best, absolute best book on social skills I've ever found. If you suffer social anxiety, or if you're really shy like I used to be, I'm still kind of shy. You look at this book, you learn the techniques in this book, and it's so in-depth, it's incredible. They talk to you about how to make new friends, what to do when you have a lot of friends but you don't feel close to them, or how to approach a group at a party, how do you join a conversation, how do you deal with a conversation that's just people are incredibly loud and you have a trouble like asserting yourself, how do you deal with being an introvert in an extroverted world, and how do you reconcile making deep friends with having to go make friends so you don't feel like it but you have to. How do you deal with sort of the pressure of having to go out and socialize, but you have social anxiety? This book will cover it. I'll highly recommend it. Now that we've talked about relationships, number one social environmental factor that will help with your depression, second tool I have to give you is to get rid of your toxic environment. Get out of there. All right. To give you an example, my girlfriend, she was, when she was living with her mom, she wasn't feeling happy. She was feeling kind of depressed, and actually quite depressed to some extent. And then she moved out. She decided to move out. She took the plunge. She changed her environment, and then all of a sudden, all of her depression lifted like magic. Now, that might not be the case for you, but if you look at the cause of your depression, what is causing it, you look at the environmental factors. If it's environmental in nature, that might be the first thing you look at, right? Even before physiological or psychological. So once you determine that, if it's your toxic environment, get rid of that environment. Move away from that environment. And I know some people, they tell me, oh, but I've been friends with that person for years. I don't know if I can get rid of them. Yes, you can. And unfortunately, if you've been living with a narcissist manipulator, these people never change. I can tell you straight up, they're not going to change. So the best option is to go out and make new friends. Of course, sometimes you can address the issue by talking to them directly, asserting yourself, which, by the way, asserting yourself is part of healthy self-esteem, and which helps with your depression. So if you assert yourself, it's going to help. You can set strong boundaries with that person, and maybe you can resolve the toxic environment that way. So you start with addressing that. I have many videos on how to deal with manipulators. I'm not going to get into it here, but you can look into these videos. Basically, get rid of your toxic environment. That's going to help your depression. The third tip to help you in your environmental/social sphere of existence is getting out of what I call survival mode. Now, what is survival mode is referring to Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'll try to put a photo here if I remember. Basically, we all have different needs that lead us to self-actualization or happiness. So first are the basic needs like food, shelter, sex, even just safety, just feeling safe, like you're not going to get robbed at gunpoint, or like that you're going to get killed by a serial killer, whatever, okay? Those are the basic needs. After that, you have the love, self-esteem needs, and then self-actualization and so forth. But first, you need the food, safety needs first. So what I say with getting out of survival mode is, if you're struggling financially, if you can't even get food on your plate, if you struggle with all of these things, then it makes no sense to try to work on the spiritual aspect right now, or try to do CBT. No, you need to find money. You need to get food. Once you get this sort of base need met, then that's definitely going to help your mood, and you have more room then to work on different aspects of your life, like CBT, finding your purpose in life. And there's just nothing, if you don't have these base level needs met, then you have to meet them. So I have a story for you that I've had two potential clients that spoke to me on consultations, and they were homeless basically. And I told them basically, listen, I wish I could help you, but I didn't tell it to them that way. But basically, hey, listen, you don't have a home, you're homeless. you have to deal with this first before you hire a life coach. It makes no sense. I'm not going to help you put food on your plate. That's not my job. My job is to help you psychologically set goals in your life, whatever, take action in your life. It's not to put food on your plate. So I just told them straight up, I can't help them. And that's because they weren't survivable. If you're in survivable, you have no money, you get a job, get some money, and get a stable foundation upon which you can lay the groundwork and lay the work of CBT, therapy, good sleep, hygiene, whatever, all of these things that will help your depression. Start with getting out of survival first. The fourth tip I have for you to deal with the environmental/social factor of depression is to do something. Get a job, do something with your life. I remember there's this video from psychologist Dr. Jordan Peterson who was talking about depression. And the first thing he asks to people who say they're struggling with depression is, well, do you have a job? Do you have friends? No? Well, first get a job, and second, go get friends. I'm paraphrasing here loosely, but that's basically what he was saying. And I believe it's because when you get a job, you feel like this sort of sense of competency, no matter what you're doing, even if it's mopping the floor or flipping burgers, it doesn't matter. That sort of simple work that you do gives you this sort of sense of competency that you're contributing to the world in some way, even if it's menial and simple. Because it's very hard, in my opinion, to feel happy and proud of yourself if all you're doing is laying down in your bed and doing nothing. So to have this base level of feeling you're contributing or doing something good, you have to do something with your life. For example, me, I decided that I'll become self-employed. That's what I do. I coach clients, I make those videos. This is my decision. What are you gonna do? Do something with your life. It doesn't have to be a job per se, but you have to find something that, is work, quote unquote. You have to have certain personal projects or something to strive towards in the physical environment, in the physical world that you do, and that you exert this power on the external world as to make something happen, right? So emphasis here on the external world, because you can think and daydream all you want in your mind, but unless it manifests in the external world, then the external sphere of dealing with your depression and all that, it's not gonna do anything. You need to go out there in the external world and make something happen. So if you don't know what to do, just get a job. That's what I'd recommend. Another benefit of just getting a job is that you get in contact with other people. Therefore, it helps socially speaking. You're in contact with other human beings. And when you're really depressed, usually you tend to close yourself off and not get out of your house. So just this contact with other people, can help your depression. Number 5 thing you can do is to keep your house clean. When you keep your house clean, it helps your environment in a way that you see that, not only are you being productive, so you have this feeling of accomplishment, but also how you see your environment is also a reflection of your mind in a sense. So if your environment is clean, then you're gonna have cleaner thoughts, you're gonna just be more sharp mentally, you're gonna be in a better headspace than if it's just, messy everywhere. So I don't know if it's been proven to be true, but I found firstly that for it to help, and this is also what Jordan Peterson says, clean your damn room. Before you do anything in the world, you feel depressed, just the first thing you can do is clean your room. And it's such a simple statement. It feels so simple. Why would cleaning my room solve my depression? It's not going to do anything. Well, yes, it might, because it is a simple step. It's a simple step to take. And if getting a girlfriend is this goal you have that seems insurmountable, at least if you can clean your room, or at least if you can do these simple steps like wake up early in the morning or whatever it is, those simple steps do add up. So don't neglect the simple steps. The 6th thing to deal with the environmental, material, social sphere of the world is to find fun things to do. Find hobbies and schedule it into your day. For example, my cause of my depression was, I felt burnt out. I felt like I had no time for myself, and I felt like I wasn't having fun, and it just became a chore. So I added certain activities, whether it be socializing, video games to a healthy extent, right? You don't want to binge video games. Just, anything that feels fun to you, that feels good to you, have these hobbies. I started playing chess recently, even did some Rubik's Cube, any sort of hobbies like that, which are great. Supplement, and it just helps your life overall to have more sort of a well-rounded life. And when you partake in new hobbies, this engages your brain, different neural pathways, because when you, let's say, for example, you take a different route to work, then that your brain is engaged in a different way, like it's seeing a new environment. For example, learning a new language has this similar effect on pathways, and I believe even new hobbies that has this sort of effect. And the 7th tip to deal with the environmental material sphere of depression is to have flow state activities. Now, what is flow? Flow is a concept coined by positive psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi on his book Flow, that basically he says that happiness, one huge determinant of happiness is flow state activities. To be in a state of flow, what flow is basically being in the zone, quote unquote, where you're so immersed in an activity where the skill and the challenge, your abilities and the challenge completely meets at the perfect meeting point, where it's completely balanced, and you're just completely immersed in that activity. So it could be meditation. For me, for example, it's shooting videos. I get really in flow state, when I'm shooting the right video about the topic that I enjoy. This is an example of flow state. You can get it through sports. You can get it even in a interaction with someone else. Sometimes, during my days when I was socializing a lot, practicing my social skills, I would really get in that flow state where just when I spoke to someone, it just felt right. It just felt like everything clicked into place. What I was saying was making other people laugh, and I was laughing. I was having a great time, and just sharing that energy with other people. Sometimes that can be a source of flow. Now, you want to determine these flow state activities in your life. I recommend you read the book if you want to learn more about that. And that's definitely something you want to add more of in your life. Now that we've looked into the environmental sphere, now let's look into the spiritual sphere. Now, this is the most advanced sphere. Definitely not the first sphere you want to look at when it comes to depression, but it's definitely something you want to look at if you looked at everything else and it still feels like there's this lack of meaning or purpose. So you feel like this lack of connection. If you feel this sort of existential crisis, or your depression is existential in nature, then I think touching on these spiritual spheres is imperative. I think it's in fact needed. And it's something that's been proven, actually. I don't have the literature in front of me, but apparently things like meditation, even if it's in a non-religious way, which is, I think you should do meditation, whether you're religious or not. It's been proven through countless studies that it helps with depression. It helps with feeling better about yourself, helps with anxiety. I think even prayer has been proven to make you feel better. I think there's even scientific studies on that, so you can even look at that. But besides the religious aspect, I want to talk spiritually, sort of in the grander scheme of just having a connection with something, whether it be with the world or with something grander than yourself. That's kind of what I mean by spirituality, not necessarily in a religious fashion. Whether it's as essential or not, the spiritual sphere is up to debate, but Abraham Maslow's, in the latter portion of his life, he realized that beyond self-actualization, there's another part called self-transcendence, which touches upon the spiritual aspect, which he believes that to transcend oneself, to find a cause greater than oneself, and transcends one body, ego, and mind, is a fundamental need, according to him. So that's interesting in the sense that, he says it's fundamental, but how many people even touch upon that? I think very little, it's like almost no one, touches upon the spiritual sphere. So let's really dive into that right now. So the first thing to add to address the spiritual sphere to help with the depression is to figure out who you are, what you want, and what you want in your life. Because if you know who you are, if you know what you want, this sort of clarity in your life will make you feel better. It's just something that's not talked about a lot in psychology, I believe, or in therapy. But if you figure out your purpose, you figure out what you want, which is what a lot of life coaches can help you with, this will inherently help your depression. You have clarity of purpose, you know what to do, therefore you feel better, you feel more fulfillment in your life. It's as simple as that. Which leads me to my second point, which is logotherapy. Logotherapy is a therapy coined by Viktor Frankl, the author of the book Man's Search for Meaning, where, he was going through the concentration camps in World War II from Hitler, the Nazi concentration camps, and he found that he could find happiness and survive despite the atrocities of being a concentration camp survivor by finding purpose in his life. By finding purpose to survive, so he could see his wife, for example. Finding this purpose was the root thing that helped him to overcome his despair, depression, and I believe that it's incredibly powerful, and I don't think logotherapy is even touched upon. I think in academic circles, I don't think it's even talked about at all, because logotherapy, I believe, is not purely scientific, but it borders in sort of might go towards the spiritual realm, and because it's really existential in nature, it's not really sort of a scientific, sort of hard scientific sort of therapy, which is why I think it's not really regarded as much. But finding your purpose has been proven to help depression in logotherapy. Therefore, it's something you might consider. So I recommend the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl if you want to learn more. The third tip I have for you to deal with the spiritual sphere of depression is to learn to be present to the moment and to be more what I call process oriented. Now, my feet are getting super numb. I've been standing for 2 hours. Anyways, so this concept of being more present to the moment that can help your depression is taken from Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now, where this is an anecdotal experience, so this is just anecdotal, but what helped him to cure his depression, Eckhart Tolle, was suicidally depressed, severely depressed, and basically he enlightened to the present moment. That's what helped him cure his depression. And it's fascinating how, if you understand, if you learn to be more present to the moment, not focus on the future or the past, but focusly, intensely on the now, how that can help you feel better, just more grounded, more in touch with your emotions. That's just something that really helps. And what the book teaches you as well to help you be more present is to be aware of the monkey mind that they call, or the mental chatter in your mind that you can call your ego mind, whatever you want to call it, and learn to distantiate yourself and have sort of be able to step back and be, oh, okay, my mind is telling me I'm not enough. Okay, that's just my mind, whatever. And you continue on, you learn sort of have distance on yourself, which I think is key to spiritual practice, is sort of have this able to view yourself in a certain way, in the third person perspective. I'm not going to go super deep into that here, but you can definitely check the book if you want to learn more into becoming more present. Which leads me to my next point to deal with the spiritual sphere, and it is to do meditation. Meditation, as I've said, has been proven to help with anxiety, depression in certain clinical studies, and it's incredibly powerful what it can do. It's really taking Eckhart Tolle's concept of being present in the moment and applying it, within a specific practice. So this is something you can actually quantify and measure in your life. So how much meditation you do probably will determine how much better you feel, how more present you feel, how less depressed you feel. So that's something you can actually do, practically speaking, in your life to improve it. So, for example, I do 20 to 30 minutes a day, or every other day. That's pretty much what I do, and it's going to help you a ton. So the fifth thing that I recommend is to practice forgiveness. Forgiveness for the people who've hurt you. Practice sort of gratitude, forgiveness for, the negative things that happen in your life, because realize that the people who've hurt you in the past, maybe your parents, maybe a bully or someone toxic, they were just hurt in the past, and they just don't know any better, and they're sort of, they were in a low state in their lives, so they decided to hurt you. Maybe the world isn't fair to you because that's just how the world was at the time. And it's just the world is impersonal, the world isn't out there to get you. It's just a force of nature, like how a snake will bite, how a venomous snake will bite you if he sees you. It's not that the snake is evil, it's just in its nature to bite you. Same with the world. The world isn't out there to get you, it's just in its nature to not necessarily be fair. And some people were just messed up in the head. They're not out there to get you specifically. Well, maybe they are, but that's another story. But yes, even if they were out there to get you, it's not personal, in a sense that they're just doing it because they don't know any better. And maybe that can help you sort of have a perspective as to understand, you know what, he just doesn't know any better, and maybe he's dumb, but we're all dumb in some way, shape, or form, so I forgive him. And can you sincerely practice that? Can you do that? I know that might sound a bit far-fetched, but if you're really hurt inside, but try to consider that the people who've hurt you in the past don't hurt you because they want to, but because they don't have a choice and it's not intentional. So maybe consider that. And definitely the best step probably to develop your spiritual sphere is to develop your connection with the world. You can call it God, the universe, absolute infinity, but I don't like using these words, as these tend to be trigger words that people don't like. And it sort of steers them away because they think of religion and they don't like religion. But just sort of a connection with the world, connection with others, connection with something greater than yourself, whatever you believe in. And something like a walk in nature can do that, for example, or just sort of reading, inspiring books, watching like an inspiring movie. Those are sort of like help you connect to things greater than yourself. You connect with humanity as a whole. In a strange way, when I shoot these videos, for example, I feel like I'm connecting not just, with the concepts I'm talking about, but I'm connecting with you. I'm connecting with the grander world that is reality itself. Connecting in a sense that, the words that I say have an impact not only on you, but on everyone who will watch it. It has an impact on the world. And I feel like this sort of connection in a way when I do that. So find these activities that help you connect with something greater than yourself. I think that's sort of a simpler way of putting it. And the last tip to help develop your spiritual sphere is looking into mystical experiences and potentially psychedelics. Now, definitely consult with a doctor. I don't promote the use of illicit drugs, again, as I've said 10 times. But for example, ayahuasca, I don't know how you pronounce it. It's something you can do legally if you go to Peru. You talk to a shaman and they guide you through the process of this psychedelic experience. Has been proven to be incredibly restorative, helpful in terms of dealing with trauma and all that. Or doing psychedelics like psilocybin mushrooms I've talked about. So these can really help you connect with something deeper than yourself. And as I've said, people report amazing benefits from these. So now that we've spoken about the 4 spheres, we've talked about everything, relating to, recovering from depression, dealing with depression. We've talked about certain methodological issues when it comes to what science is doing in order to progress the field of depression and science and all that. We've talked about that. We've talked about, what's, going at things one thing at a time and testing, using the scientific method on yourself and all that. Now, I'm sure you might have some issues with that, like thinking maybe this is not going to work. I'm going to address your questions here. So the first thing you might ask is, should I use medication? Of course, ask your doctor. I can't answer this question for you. But what I think is that if you're severely depressed and in danger of harming yourself, if you harm yourself, there's nothing that we can recover from that. So you need to, if you're really severely depressed, probably you'd have to take medication, though you have to speak to your doctor. Another question. But I don't have the energy to do all these things. You said so many things in that video and there's no way I'll be able to do it all. This is just insane. I can't even get out of bed. How am I gonna, fix all of my life? Well, I definitely understand if you're severely depressed or you feel really down in the dumps, it's really hard to even get started on one thing. But if you watch the video that far, it's like, wow, you did really take the steps necessary to improve your life. Therefore, I think you're able to at least do one thing, which is amazing. So look at, you don't want to do everything at once. You want to start with, as I said, the lowest hanging fruit, the simplest thing you can do. Just try one thing and see if you feel better. Even if it's as simple as taking fish oil supplements, as simple as that. The omega-3 supplements, you buy them and you just take them once in the morning, that's it. Simple thing. You start with one thing, and I want to challenge you that, even if you've tried many of the things in the list, it's not about doing them all, it's about finding that one thing that really works well for you. Personally, for me, the things that have helped me most with dealing with my depression is looking into cognitive behavioral therapy. That was the number one thing for me. CBT journaling has been, I think, the most transformational when it comes to helping with my depression. Definitely something you want to do, as it really, literally helps you rewire your brain. Personally, that was the best thing for me. So do them all, try them one by one and see what works. Next question. I've tried all the things you've told me. I've improved my sleep, improved my exercise, I've tried socializing, I tried therapy, I tried antidepressants. None of these things have worked. How do I know, I don't think these things that you told me are gonna work any better. Well, I want to challenge you and ask you, have you tried these things for 7 to 21 days in a row consistently? Have you done these practices like meditation, like exercise, like better sleep? Were you able to at least do that for 7 days straight or more? If that's not the case, then I would say try again, but try doing it consistently without skipping a day, or the least amount of days as possible, because we're not perfect. Try these. And also, I want to ask you, have you tried many solutions at once, or have you only tried one thing? Because if you only tried all of these things separately, then that's different than combining them synergistically. So for example, if you only do therapy, but the rest of your life is a disaster, and then you're like, you know what, therapy is not working, you stop therapy, and then you do something else, like you eat right, and it's not helping. Okay, it's not helping fixing my nutrition, I'm gonna stop eating right, and then now I'm gonna try to get a girlfriend, right? So see, what if you did therapy, and you also ate right, and you also went out there to socialize and meet a girlfriend? That's really different than just trying them individually. So see, you want to use the scientific method here and do many things. You want to synergistically add many things together as you progress and as you try new things, and you will find the perfect formula that works for you eventually. And of course, if it still doesn't work, then you might need some more serious intervention, which is fine. You might have to talk to a doctor, a psychotherapist about that. I won't be able to, I'm not going to venture into that here, but you might need some more serious intervention, certain medication, and so forth. In concluding thoughts, I believe that, science has given you many solutions. I've given you many solutions about depression. I've given you so many avenues that you can start implementing in your life right now, okay? But it's a matter now of exploring for yourself. And, I believe as the frontiers of science expand and hopefully become more integral and holistic and start including those latter spheres that I talked to you about in this video, hopefully they'll become more complete. But as of right now, I feel like the scientific paradigm is really sort of reductionistic, and because of that, I think it's not optimal. You want to look at all the spheres, as I've said, so experiment with all of the spheres. But I believe as time progresses, then maybe there'll be better medication in the future, in 100 years, maybe 200 years, that will help with depression, or maybe in a few decades, who knows. But for now, I feel like the field it's really lacking in some ways. So you might need to experiment in your own ways. So now let's look into creating your recovery plan. So here's your plan to improve your depression. Number one, make a solid commitment that you will do everything in your power to improve your depression. If you don't make this commitment, then it doesn't matter what you do. You need to commit 100%. Even if I lack energy, even if I feel like shit, even if I feel depressed, I feel I can't do everything, I'm still going to do everything in my power, even if it's 0.1% to improve my depression. So make this commitment. Number two, you want to look at the list of options I've outlined to you, these sort of tools and techniques, and just pick one. Pick one thing you're going to start today and just start with that. And you might have to watch this video a few times, look at the sort of things I've suggested, and try some of these, add some things in, remove some things that are not working really well, and you just sort of fine-tune your plan as you go. Make sure you do them daily. You might, if you track it on a whiteboard or something, that might help you. And just try and see what works for you, really. And the point here is to be consistent. Take one thing, note it down, say, okay, I'll do meditation every day. You write down meditation, and you put a green check mark anytime that you do it for 30 days. So that's something you can do, and consistency is key here. If you're having trouble with consistency, if you skip 2-3 days and you have one good day, you skip 2-3 days, it's fine. We all have bad days. Sometimes you just need to lay down in your bed and sort of stare at the ceiling and cry a little bit. Something like that happens. And you might need a few days like that, but then you get back on track, a few days later. As long as you keep getting back on track, that's all that matters. Even if you have an entire week where you totally fall off the wagon. So be easy on yourself on that. Don't, trying to be super strict. And it's gonna get better. I promise you it's gonna get better, because it certainly did for me. And many people, I'm sure, they've found ways to improve their depression. It's not something you're stuck with for the rest of your life. And what I recommend you do is, after you've done a lot of these things, reassess your mental state a few weeks later or maybe a month later, and ask yourself, how do I feel now compared to a month ago? Personally, if I do this assessment right now, because I've done all of these everything I've talked to you about in this video, I've pretty much done, okay? Because I've done all of these things, I feel so much better now than I felt 2-3 months ago, because of these practices. And I believe that you can do the same thing, you just have to do them. So in conclusion, to deal with your depression, look at the 4 spheres that I've talked to you about: the physical, physiological, environmental, spiritual. Don't fall for material reductionism that science, has put you into, and look at things more in an integral and holistic way. Look at the spheres you're weaker in and start working on these spheres, and start with the lowest hanging fruit to get started. If it's just exercise, you exercise whatever that low hanging fruit is. And that's it, my friends. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a comment. Let me know if there's certain things you've tried that help you, or certain criticisms you have. I'm open to it. And if you really enjoyed this video on depression, then you're gonna love this video here about the 10 cognitive distortions. That's really going to help you in CBT, the technique, #1 technique that has helped me the most. So click on this video here, and I'll see you then.